Sturkey, and welcome to Simple Spiritual Practices. In each episode of this podcast, we'll talk about one tangible practice that will help you know yourself and God better. Most of these practices can be done in 5 minutes or less, so you can easily try it out today. If you are ready to experience real growth in your life, or if you want fresh ideas on how to approach your time with God, this podcast is for you. Do you ever feel like you keep running up against the same wall over and over again? What are those areas in your life where you just feel stuck, like you are struggling to change or move forward at all? As I reflected on areas in my own life where I feel stuck, I noticed that for some of them, they are things that I potentially could have some control over if I ever managed to get enough motivation or discipline or energy or whatever else I might need to actually do what needs to get done. And with other things, they are completely outside of my control. They involve other people who, no matter how much I might try, I can't control what they do. And as we all know, we can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. But if that's the case, then how do we actually do that? How do we manage to change ourselves, especially when it feels like we keep hitting the same wall over and over again, stuck and unable to change? For example, when my kids aren't listening, or when they're fighting with each other constantly, when they seem to do the exact opposite of everything I tell them, I can't actually make them change. Believe me, I've tried. But what I can do is change the way I respond to them. I can change my attitude and perspective. I can respond in love instead of anger or impatience. Except, how does one actually do that? Because when you're exhausted, when you've tried so hard to change and act better, but you keep running into the same wall that keeps you from moving forward, what then? It could be an area of life where maybe you can't seem to find self-discipline. This might be around your habits, your physical health, or that long list of nagging tasks that never seem to get done. Or maybe it's the job that fills you with dread or drudgery each time you think about it. And every once in a while, you find a way to make it feel meaningful, but somehow it keeps falling back into the same rut. Or maybe it's the dream job you keep trying to get for yourself, but maybe you faced rejection, or you just haven't found something that feels like the right fit for you. These are just a few examples of the walls we run into that make us feel stuck when we're trying to change. And you can probably relate to some of them, but all of us have at least one area of life where we just feel stuck. It really and truly feels like there is a physical wall standing between us and what we want or need, and we just keep running into it over and over again. And it feels like we're not making progress. Or if we do make progress, it doesn't last, and that big old wall just keeps rising up again and again. We keep trying to get past it. We fight really hard and struggle against it with all of our weight thrown into it, every ounce of strength we can muster, trying to bust through that darn wall. But it doesn't move, and we're stuck. We're tired and discouraged, wondering why even bother trying at all. So what I'm finding is that when we feel stuck, generally we have one of two responses. We either keep fighting or we give up. So we might push and strive and work really hard to get through that wall. Or maybe instead, we turn away from it, deciding it's easier to pretend that the wall isn't even there. We give up, we avert our eyes, we settle into the rut because it just feels easier to not even try. But there is another way. It's nothing new, and even when it came to mind for me as I was running up against my own walls this week, I almost couldn't believe that I had forgotten about this. But there it was, a gentle reminder, an invitation to try something different. Instead of fighting or giving up, I could simply surrender. And it always comes back to this invitation to surrender, to give it all over to Jesus and to trust him, to remember that changing our lives does not depend on us, that it's something only Jesus can do. And this happens not from striving outwardly, but from an inner work that will transform us from the inside out. So, how do we actually surrender? What does that look like? And how is surrender different from giving up? Let's take a deeper look at the two responses we might have when we keep running into a wall, when we feel stuck in an area of our lives and feel like we can't change. Our response might be one of two things. Either we fight really hard to push through, or we give up in defeat. So first, let's talk about what it might look like to surrender when we're fighting. So when I think of this idea of running into a wall, it actually helps me to picture what this might look like in my head. So when I feel stuck, it's like I picture myself in front of an actual physical, literal wall. So when I see this wall in my head, it's made up of bricks and stone and wood. It's really tall and I can't see over the top of it, and it's really thick. So as I imagine myself in front of this wall and I'm fighting against it, I picture myself hitting it with my fist, or maybe I'm trying to pry the wood and stones off with the tips of my fingers, or I throw the entire weight of my body against it, hoping that it will move, that I can break through whatever it is keeping me stuck and get to the other side of it, where the person I want to become and the life I want to lead is waiting. But as I'm fighting and realize it's not working, that the wall isn't budging, I recognize that Jesus is there with me, and he's inviting me to just sit down next to him, to rest, and to stop fighting so hard. This is the picture of surrender. We stop fighting and striving and pushing against this wall that just won't move, and we rest in the presence of Jesus. We trust that when it is time to move, he's going to show us what to do, and that we will move forward together. But first, we have to stop fighting and surrender, to abide with Jesus, to simply be with him and experience his love for us, which is the only thing that will actually lead to life change that will last. So that's what it looks like when we're fighting against the wall. But sometimes when we run into a wall, we don't fight, but instead we give up in defeat. So how do we move to surrender then? And how does surrender look different than giving up? So the main difference I see is that when we're giving up in defeat, we are pretending that the wall isn't even there. If you go back to that idea of picturing this in your head, imagine this big, giant physical wall in front of you, and it's like you turn your back to it and look in another direction. We pretend everything's fine and that we're good just the way we are. We think this is just who I am now and growth isn't possible. We simply look the other way. Basically, we are living in denial that the wall even exists. But when we surrender, we turn and we face the wall. We look directly at it and acknowledge the height of it and the strength of it. We are facing our own weakness and we're acknowledging what is broken in us. We name what the wall is keeping us from being and becoming. And the thing is, we don't do this alone. We do this with Jesus. We face the wall together. We don't turn away or run from the wall, but we sit down next to Jesus and rest in his presence. And instead of feeling defeated by what's keeping us from change, we ask Jesus what he wants us to see, and he will begin to separate the truth from the lies. So this is what it means to surrender. When we are hitting the wall that is keeping us from change, we don't run from it and we don't try to fight our way through it, but we sit down with Jesus and surrender. We rest in his presence, knowing that we cannot do this ourselves. There will be a time to move, and there is still work for us to do, but it is a work that will start on the inside, that Jesus will do through us, and he will move forward with us. We will not go alone. But first, we must surrender. We must have the courage to stop fighting and to face whatever it is that has us stuck. But as we do this, we are not afraid because we are safe in the loving presence of our friend, Jesus. If you're feeling stuck today, if it feels like there's an area of your life that growth and progress is just not happening and you don't know why, maybe your next step is to surrender. So for today's practice, I want to invite you to actually visualize this idea of a wall in your mind, to picture a literal physical wall standing before you as you think through what is keeping you stuck. Now, for some of you, this will come more naturally than others, and that's okay. But God gave us our imaginations and creative minds, and sometimes it can be really helpful to picture something tangible to help us name the intangible spiritual things. So even if this feels kind of awkward at first, that's okay. Just give it a try and see if it helps. And I'll lead you through this together in the episode, but I also invite you to give it some more space later on your own. And I have all of these questions and guides in the show notes for you if you want to look at it further. So as we think about this together, I'm just going to lead you through what it means to visualize this wall and name where you're stuck. So first, consider this. Where are you feeling stuck? It could be a relationship, an issue at work, or maybe it's an area of personal growth that you just can't seem to get a handle on. Name what it is. Where are you stuck? What is the wall that you're facing? Then, if you're able, close your eyes and actually picture a physical wall. What does it look like? And what does that wall represent to you? Next, imagine what is on the other side of that wall. What is this wall keeping you from? Who do you want to be? And what does life look like on the other side of it? So as you are picturing this wall in front of you, imagine yourself beside it and think about your posture towards the wall right now. Are you fighting against it, trying really hard to break through? Or are you turning away from it, pretending it's not there? Maybe you're even trying to run away from it. Where are you next to the wall, and what are you doing? Next, I want you to imagine that Jesus is there with you at the wall. How does it feel to know He's there with you and that you're not alone? What might Jesus want to say to you about this wall, this place where you feel stuck? Hear the invitation of Jesus to surrender, to stop fighting against the wall or running away from it, but to simply sit down beside Him and rest in His presence. And as you do this, as you rest in the presence of Jesus, consider if there's a next step that you can take with Jesus to begin moving forward wherever you're stuck. But don't rush ahead to this. If all you do today is surrender and rest in His presence, allow that to be enough. Trust that He will help you move forward in His timing and in His strength. And as you close your time in this practice, say a prayer of surrender. Acknowledge that Jesus is with you as you move forward in your day, as you go about whatever comes next for you, and you have those feelings of striving or defeat that rise up in you. As you feel stuck, simply pray, Jesus, I surrender this to you. Just keep releasing it back to Him and trust that He is with you. In those moments that we feel stuck and unable to change, we too often forget that we are not alone and that Jesus is there with us, willing and ready to help us. He will give us everything we need to move forward in His timing. But first, we give up the fight, we stop running, and we sit and rest in surrender. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of Simple Spiritual Practices. If you want to download a free printable for this week's practice or find other resources to help you take next steps, visit lindsaysturkey.com/free. This podcast is part of the New Hope Podcast Network, and production is done by Darren Hansen. You can check out all the podcasts on the network by visiting newhopechurch.cc/listen. Make sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode, and we'll be back with a new episode next week.